Apollo 11 mission on the master consoles, the mission consoles, then going on to the maneuver master consoles for Apollo 13, and then becoming the CTO for IBM throughout the NASA project for 17 years, and followed up to the space shuttle. And then for fun, going into IBM Austin Labs for the remainder of your IBM career and dealing with such topics and capabilities. It's my pleasure to invite up here Homer R. to talk about that very much experience. Please join me in welcoming him. I don't know, they've set this up for a tennis match. We're doing a little thing.
I gave up tennis.
There you go. We got a little feng shui going on here for a second. All right, fine. All right. Well, welcome, Homer. Thank you for being here. And it's been a pleasure. We've been exchanging, like, who's your favorite astronauts of all time type stuff there. But I look at this, and I look at this with a great passion. And to have, by the way, a Presidential Freedom Award winner for his work on Apollo 13 join us is quite an honor, to say the least.
Yeah.
Let's back up a little bit. You're forcing me to return to PS 117 at my time there. You were at NASA at the time, but that's okay. Let's talk about Apollo 11 first of all, because people may not be fully aware of the mission plan, of what the mission plan was, your role in the mission, and then of course a little bit of IBM's role to start off with.
Okay, well the mission plan was actually, if you looked at the mission plan per se, it was very thick. It was 4 inches thick, 3-ring binders, double-sided, very detailed small print, and that was for every console. But the simple mission plan was, for the first time in the history of mankind, let's land a man on the moon, and let's bring him home safe. And the 4,000 IBMers that helped do that worked on the following things. We worked on the IU, which was a really dumb name for the avionics system for the Saturn V rocket. We did that in Huntsville, Alabama. We designed it, we implemented it, and we integrated it so that it flew and could be the brains of the Saturn V rocket. The hardware, in terms of the computers, were built in Owego, New York. The second thing we did was we did the launch processing system at the Cape, where we checked out the Saturn V rocket and the spacecraft before they were launched. So no launch for Apollo was ever done without the IBM LPS saying go. Third thing we did was we did the Manned Spaceflight Network Center in Greenbelt, Maryland at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. That system managed and controlled the entire worldwide network for communications and tracking for all of the Apollo missions. And every bit of data that went up and down to the spacecraft and to and from mission control went through that facility. The fourth thing we did was we did the simulation and training system in Houston, Texas, which in conjunction with the hardware spacecraft simulators, we trained every astronaut and every flight controller for every mission. And that system could run with or without the hardware trainers, so we could train with or without the astronauts being required. And the fourth thing we did was we did the real-time computer complex as part of mission control in Houston. Now you see them on TV and in the movies, you always see the MOCR, you see the Mission Operations Control Room. Well, the RTCC, that was on the second and third floor. On the first floor was where the real-time computer complex was. And by comparison to the mainframes, we had 5 360-75s, serial numbers 1 through 5. The first 360-75s ever produced were the RTCC ones. And that was a commitment by Watson himself. Legacy has it. That's where I worked. I worked in the RTCC. I was a programmer and a mathematician. I worked in the maneuver control department with 8 other people. We we handle powered flight computations and processing. Powered flight, another word for that is maneuver. Okay, things like descent, ascent, translunar injection, rather complicated things. 8 of us were responsible for over 500,000 lines of code for Apollo 11. You can do the math, that's a lot of code per person, and it was extremely complex. Personally, in addition to that, for Apollo 11, I manned the Dynamics console for the mission. And the Dynamics console was responsible for all of the trajectory computations and processing during the mission. Not just maneuvers, but free flight, everything that we did. So I not only had to know what my department did, I had to know what all of the trajectory departments did, and how to make the computers do everything they were supposed to do relative to that. In particular, on July 20th, 1969, I computed the final descent maneuver, the targets for which were uplinked to the onboard computer and given to the astronauts to execute. I did that about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and about 3:20, with the rest of the world, I got to hear, at the ripe old age of 22, contact, engine off, vehicle has landed.
Let's go back to that time frame there. It was quite a great moment, but quite a dangerous moment in that regard. You got these massive runbook plans in front of you, mission plans in front of you. During that descent, there's a couple of things that occur. So mission plans don't always go according to plan. I like to say there's 2 things you can do to a plan. You can write the plan and then change the plan. In the case of what you're doing there, how did the execution plan have to change, and how did you respond to that there?
Well, clearly, during descent, and it's well publicized, and we could talk about it for quite a while if you actually wanted to, that we didn't have communications throughout descent, especially not at the start for about 5 minutes. And after that, we had the alarms, and they kept going off. And the other thing is, we went 2 minutes longer than we thought we would, because we were flying a little bit hot, and also because of that, we were long, and there was things on the ground. So we could talk about that for quite a while if we wanted to, but I would tell you that the biggest thing that deviated from the mission plan that I like to talk about was very personal for me, and that had to do with the fact that the astronauts made the choice that after they landed and they were safe, they weren't going to rest. The mission plan called for a 3 or 4 hour rest period before they dressed up and walked. They said, heck with that, we're getting out. And for me, that was good, because I got off the console about 7 o'clock in the evening. I was thinking I'd go home, eat supper, play with my kids who were 20 months old and 4 months old. And I'd go to sleep, and my wife would wake me up when we walked on the moon. Well, I didn't have to do that, because after we ate and I played with my kids, I got to sit on the couch in my den with my 20-month-old son between me and my wife, and my 4-month-old daughter on my lap, and I got to watch Neil Armstrong walk down that ladder and make that statement that everybody knows. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. And I couldn't help but believe at the time that that was so appropriate, because I couldn't help but think about all the millions and millions of small steps that people like me and 400,000 colleagues in industry and the government took in order for him to be able to take that small step and that giant leap. And I was always thankful for them for doing that for me, because shortly thereafter, I went to bed. It was about 10 o'clock at night. I had to get up at 5 in the morning, because on the 21st, we were going to do ascent and rendezvous and come back to Earth. So I've always been thankful for them making that decision.
Nothing like a good sleep.
Good, nothing like a
night's
good 6 hours sleep.
There you are. But you know, you sit back here and you look at the number of variables, permutations that are going on. You know, and I juxtapose that to some environments today of levels of complexity in IT shops that far outstripped, if I may be so bold, Apollo 11.
Sure.
And what happened there. And you had to have a mission that had flawless execution, right? That was the intent. But back then, what was backup and recovery? I mean, you can't say, well, we're running at that point, you know, we have a bunch of satellites up there. Well, you didn't have this massive T1 going from Houston to the moon, right, 240,000 miles. Yeah, you know, so how did you make sure you had continuous availability on this mission throughout the process here?
Well, in some specific cases, like the IU for the Saturn V, I mean, that was a quadruply redundant, fail-safe, fail-operational system. So they had a lot of redundancy in every component. The LPS at the Cape was similar. In the RTCC, we had a lot of redundancy and backup. We had backups and redundancy for every piece of the hardware system that we could think of. We ran, for like descent, we ran with 375s supporting descent. One of them was the prime computer, one of them was a real-time backup, and one of them was a third, static, standby. And because of our sophisticated software capability of the day, we could do things like select over and restart and back up in seconds so that we could maintain a 995 reliability for 50 continuous hours back in those days. And that was pretty remarkable for that time. I would tell you that that the other side of the coin is the single point of failure in our system was our software. If you look at the software my 8 colleagues in my department did, there was only one program that did descent. There was only one program that did ascent. There was only one program that did transmitter injection. Our 500,000 lines of code were single points of failure. If they didn't work, the mission failed. So,
sounds like you could use some microservices. We got a little decent microservice. But you know, it's interesting. You guys were pushing the limits here. But in fairness, when President Kennedy had launched the mission, right, first man to the moon, we were in the Cold War battle. We beat the Russians. Was there any discussion about security? Was there any concern about hacking? I mean, you fast forward to 2019 and the world's become quite nefarious.
Quite enamored with hacking, right? And security. Well, actually, during that day and age, everything that we did was about physical security and personnel security. Physically, all of our sites were on government property, okay? And we had a dedicated system. You know, somebody would have to physically intrude the systems in order to get into them. They'd have to physically damage the systems in order to hurt us. The biggest risk we had was our people. In most security systems, in total, everybody that's an expert in security will tell you that security, the biggest vulnerability is the people. Well, the best thing about our people were we had a dedicated set of people. We all had security clearances, but we had a dedicated set of people. I like to think of us as our Apollo band of brothers. We had a sacred bond. We had a trust and we had a dedication to what we did. We believed in it 100%. There isn't anything we wouldn't do for anybody that had a problem. I helped my colleagues with their programs. They helped me with my programs. We just made sure that we were a success, but we kept it among the family, and we were dedicated to getting it done.
That was wonderful. And you know, as you talk about the people here, you talk about the environment, obviously a lot of information flowing. You know, the movies have depicted it with slide rules all over the place, going, you know,
I used to have a candy.
Like crazy. But how did you handle like the ad hoc query, right? The ad hoc information that had to be handled in this environment here?
Well, the simple, I think it goes back to our dedication and our dedicated workforce. We knew who the experts were. I mean, I knew who the descent expert was. I knew who the ascent expert was. I knew who the Kalman filter or the Bayes filter experts were. I knew who the experts were for anything I wanted to talk about. And that was similar for all of the disciplines in the flight. During a mission, very often, a lot of the experts were around during the mission. You didn't see them, you don't see them on TV, because all you see is the one room where the flight director and his 15 to 20 key colleagues are. There were hundreds of people throughout the building, in rooms, ready to be of support to the mission if it was required. And we had a lot of lists and a lot of notes, but basically we knew who the experts were, and that's how we did our ad hoc query.
Well, you know, but you also, it's actually why we're here, right? Building, you had a tremendous amount of skills. You had some of the most talented people in the world. And by the way, you were constantly learning in that regard, in real time, if I may say so. So let's fast forward to 2019. Let's go July 20th, 2019, Apollo 11, or 11,000, let's call it here, just to change the numbers here. If you had the computing power of today, and you were doing the Apollo 11 mission, how much of the mission plan would be different? How much would you have leveraged the technology of today differently? And where do you think we would have been?
Oh, I don't doubt that we'd have leveraged the technology today. Certainly if we had things with the speed of Sierra and Summit. The simple truth is we could have done a lot more things. We could have had a lot more sources of data. We could have processed the algorithms with a lot greater accuracy and precision. We could have done them more frequently. We could have done things faster. Bottom line is we'd have had more time to think, which very often we didn't have a lot of time to think. We just had to decide based upon our training what was right and what was wrong. So basically, we were in an environment that everything was resource constrained. We not only were dealing with a tremendously complex problem, we were dealing with the fact that we couldn't do everything that we thought about doing. There were things, I can tell you for a fact, there were things that we thought about doing for Apollo 11 that we did not do until we implemented the Mission Control Center for Space Shuttle, which was 6 years later, okay? So it took us that long to get computing power that could even catch up with what we could think about doing.
Oh, we have some customers that haven't moved their COBOL compiler in that time, so that could be similar in nature. But you start putting all this together. You know, we have a lot of people who've grown up with you, Homer, and it is, the whole Apollo mission, for anybody growing up here, at least in the States, was part of our heritage, let alone our youth and into teenage, into our 20s and 30s, if you will. What would you say to the TechU participants here? You know, from a technology leadership point of view, as you reflect back on what's now 50 some odd years in technology as an IBMer, let alone, and I love the way you describe yourself, because I always encourage my team to describe themselves not only as an IBM, but for the client they serve, and you clearly do that in your NASA mission here.
Well, what I would say, and believe me, I understand change. Like I said, I worked on the first 360 in San Antonio, Texas before I went to work on the space program, and I worked on serial numbers 1 through 5 for the 360-75s on the space program. So I understand change compared to something when I read about Sierra and Summit and Z-15s and things like that. But I would offer you two pieces of things to consider that I don't think change. And those two things are this. When you're doing something, when you're picking out what you're going to do, pick out something that really matters in life. Do something that matters.